Welcome to the starting line, racers. You've strapped into your favorite Aetherdrift Commander Precon, and it's now time to fine-tune your ride for the high-speed chaos that awaits. Think of this upgrade guide as your pit crew, here to help you rev up your deck and make sure you're leaving your opponents in the dust. I swear I'm qualified to talk about this. Whether you're a seasoned racer or just got your license to drive the multiverse, we're here to guide you through the twists, turns, and turbo boosts of upgrading your deck. The Planeswalker project is not affiliated nor employed by the Department of Multiverse Vehicles. Each of our guides will show you how to turbocharge your strategies, rev your synergies, and take your deck's performance to race-winning speed. We're talking finely tuned combos, faster draws, and better maneuvers, all designed to help you outpace and outsmart the competition. So buckle up, check your mana flows, and let's dive into the raceway. Today's video will cover the Eternal Might deck, a white, blue, and black deck that focuses on zombies and aggressive card draw. Our face commander is a familiar one, Temmet Noctimun's Will, a 5-mana 4/4 zombie wizard with both vigilance and menace. Whenever we attack, we draw a card and then discard a card. Whenever we draw a card, zombies we control get +1/+1 until the end of turn. This card is impressive. We're really spelling out what the deck wants to do by having the bulk of our value engine being tacked onto our commander. Whenever we attack, we get to loot, which is drawing a card and then discarding a card, in that order. We also have an anthem boost for our zombies based on when we draw. So the more cards that we draw, the larger our zombie horde becomes. Now a quick note on the attack trigger, Temmet's ability will trigger whenever you attack with one or more creatures, so even if you attack with multiple creatures, you will still only perform the draw procedure once. That being said, this card is strong. Esper zombies are not something out of the ordinary, with Varina Lich Queen being one of my favorite zombie commanders and being rather old at this point. I feel like Temmet aims to grow our forces larger, finishing games quicker, while Varina is designed more for the long game, drawing cards based off of the attacking zombie numbers and then gaining you life. As for the remainder of this deck, we are on zombies. Zombies are one of the most fun and powerful creature types in Magic, being both very synergistic with themselves and having a host of powerful strategies including Token Swarm and Reanimator. If you've never built a zombie commander deck before, this is a fantastic starting point. Our backup commander is Hashitan Scarab's Fist, a 2-mana 1/3 zombie wizard. He has one ability, where whenever we discard a creature card, we may pay 2 and 1 blue. If we do, we create a token that's a copy of the discarded card, except it's a 4/4 black zombie. So first off, this card does have the same white, blue, and black color identity because its triggered ability contains a blue mana pip, so don't be fooled by its mana cost only being white and black. Next, this card really does feed into what Temmet wants to do in discarding cards as we draw them. As we'll see in a little bit, there are a great deal of cards in this deck that aim to cycle cards, and so this synergizes wonderfully with Hashitan's ability. This ability also recalls a popular Amonkhet mechanic, Eternalize, where we exile creatures from graveyards to create 4/4 zombie versions of them. Basically, we're making mummies out of our creatures. This ties into a lot of reanimation, which can be an approach to this deck, but what's unique about Hashitan's take on the ability is that we're not exiling the discarded card in order to create the token copy. Instead, the card remains in the graveyard and can be used later as a reanimation target. Next, let's take a look at some of the cards seeing their first printing in this deck. We always get a handful of new cards in each Commander Precon, and so it's very helpful to know which ones will likely want to be kept in the deck as we upgrade the list. Ret'tu Mystic is a 2-mana zombie bird wizard with flying. It gives each creature card in our hand the ability to be cycled for 2 mana. Basically, cycling allows us to discard the card to draw another. Cycling can be used at instant speed, so there's a great deal of strategy that this card offers. Since our commanders both care about our cards being discarded, we can use this to pitch creatures we don't want to draw cards. In Temmet's case, this can pump up our zombies when we cycle our cards. This offers us a level of card draw that we seldom see in Commander Precon decks, making every creature in the deck a potential cantrip. The mana cost for the Mystic is also very aggressive, meaning that this can come down early and begin the value engines. Undead Mentor is a 2-mana 1/1 zombie cleric. Whenever an opponent activates an ability of a permanent that isn't a mana ability, we create a 1/1 white zombie creature token. This ability will only trigger once each turn. This card is deceptively powerful. Sure, we can only use this ability once per turn, but each opponent has a turn to activate abilities, and so we can in theory net a 1/1 white zombie creature token on each of our opponent's turns, meaning that we begin our next turn with a handful of new tokens that are able to attack. This is a very low-key way this deck can still go wide, something zombies are very good at doing. We may still be aiming at growing our forces to be huge threats, but we could still go wide in the process. Lost Monarch of Ifnir is a 4-mana 4/4 zombie noble. It has Afflict 3, and it gives other zombies we control Afflict 3. At the beginning of our second main phase, if a player was dealt combat damage by a zombie this turn, we mill 3 cards and then we return a creature card from our graveyard to our hand. This card is probably the best new card in the deck. Afflict 3 is a powerful returning mechanic from Amonkhet that's triggered whenever a creature with the ability is blocked. If a creature with Afflict 3 is blocked, the defending player loses 3 life. Giving this to our entire board is brutal, as it makes blocking a far more difficult mathematics for the opponent. The defending player will lose life whether or not they block, but sometimes the zombie attacking will have a power less than 3, and so losing the 3 life off of the afflict trigger might be less than ideal. What's worse is if they do choose to take the combat damage to avoid the afflict 3, during our second main phase we can then mill 3 and return any creature card from our graveyard to our hand. We do a lot of cycling in this deck, and so this offers us a very solid recursion ability. Priest of the Crossing is a 4-mana 3/3 zombie bird cleric with flying. At the beginning of each end step, we put X +1/+1 counters onto each creature we control, where X is the number of creatures that died under our control this turn. This card is strong, but it does take a bit of setup to really get the most value. See, zombie cards die frequently, and so this can net us a good chunk of +1/+1 counters for our army. If we find a way to have our zombies die on our opponent's turns, either by combat or sacrifice, we can use this to great advantage and let us begin our turns with Titanic Zombies. Prophet of the Scarab is a 5-mana 3/4 zombie wizard with vigilance. When the Prophet enters, we draw cards equal to the number of zombies we control, or the number of zombie cards in our graveyard, whichever is greater. This is so powerful and makes for a very solid card draw spell. As we've already discussed, we do a ton of cycling in this deck, and we have the potential to go wide with tokens. Having this look at whichever value is greater and giving us that in the form of card draw can be backbreaking. If we're able to stack our graveyard full of zombies, then drop this, we can easily draw into something that can win us the game. Renewed Solidarity is a 3-mana enchantment where we choose a creature type as it enters. Creatures we control of that chosen type get +1/+0. At the beginning of our end step, for each token we control of the chosen type that entered during this turn, we create a token that's a copy of it. This card is too good for zombies. Zombie decks have the potential to make a ton of tokens all at once, and giving us another round of those tokens we created this turn can be unstoppable. On Wings of Gold is a 4-mana enchantment that gives our zombies and our creature tokens +1/+1 and flying. The tokens need not be zombies to get the anthem. Next, whenever one or more cards leave our graveyard, we create a 1/1 white zombie creature token. This offers us another anthem ability, as if zombies don't have enough of those to begin with, but it brings us flying into the mix as well, and this ability and anthem are extended to our creature tokens in general. This can be a great endgame finisher since flying creatures tend to be tricky to block, and giving our entire undead army flying can be fatal. So let's now take a look at their reprints in this deck. Zombie decks tend to have a pretty hefty core of creatures that give anthem abilities, called lords, and then creatures that just have generic value tacked onto them that are conveniently a zombie, giving them a broad range of abilities that give them excellent additions to the deck. I can appreciate by my initial look at this list that we got quite a few classic powerhouse zombie cards that will make this deck work wonders right out of the box. Starting off strong, we have Cryptbreaker, which offers us some card draw and token generation. Most times, you'll want to discard the dead cards in your hand that you don't need to pay for its activated ability. But in this deck, we have the circumstances where we might want to discard creature cards, especially if we swap out Hashiton as commander. We can use this to help set up our graveyard for the value we'll get out of it later. Next, allowing us to tap 3 zombies to draw a card is exceptional, as we can use this on the end step of an opponent's turn to draw us some cards before we begin our turn. Gravecrawler is a classic zombie staple, being a 1-drop that can be recast from the graveyard repeatedly so long as we control a zombie. This actually combos very nicely with a sack outlet that gives us black mana, such as Phyrexian Altar. If you're wanting to add this combo to your deck, just know Phyrexian Altar is a little bit of a pricier card, so it's not necessary for the deck, but it is very good. Binding Mummy is one of my favorite zombies, allowing us to tap down creatures or artifacts as our zombies enter. This can be great in the event of a mass zombie outbreak, tapping down key blockers or problem artifacts, preventing them from getting in our way. Lazotep Chancellor is a 2-drop that is our first mention of the amass mechanic. Whenever we discard a card, we may pay 1 mana. If we do, amass 2. Amass is a powerful mechanic that puts +1/+1 counters onto an army we control, equal to the number designated by the Amass ability. If we don't currently control an army, we first create a 0/0 black zombie army creature token first. Our deck does a lot of discarding, making it ideal for us to hold up some mana to begin amassing 2 each time. Our army token can become tremendous, and as we'll discuss in just a moment, we have plenty of ways of making it a central figure in winning us the game. Cemetery Reaper is a zombie lord that can exile a creature card from a graveyard to make a 2/2 black zombie token. Now this doesn't specify it has to be from our graveyard, and so we can use this as grave hate against an opponent if we need to. Gleaming Overseer gives us an enter ability of amass 1, giving us a zombie army token if we don't already have one. Moreover, it gives zombie tokens we control both hexproof and menace. Menace is a very dangerous ability for zombies to have, forcing opponents to block disadvantageously, and with hexproof, our board will be incredibly difficult to block. Speaking of Menace, Lord of the Accursed is another Anthem Lord, but it can also give our zombies Menace until the end of turn. Fun times! Plague Belcher is a 5/4 for 3 mana, but it comes in giving 2 -1/-1 counters to a creature we control. The relevant text is the final ability, where whenever another zombie we control dies, each opponent loses 1 life. Remember how I said early on that zombies tend to die frequently? This card will hurt opponents whenever they let our zombies die. Zombie Master is a unique lord that grants our zombies Swamp Walk, which renders them unblockable as long as the defending player controls a swamp. We can also pay 1 black mana to regenerate any zombie. This is another great card that become a win condition with the addition of another pricey card. Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth gives all lands in play the swamp land type, letting them tap for a black mana in addition to whatever normal color mana they produce, but more importantly, our Swamp Walk ability goes live. God Eternal Oketra is a 3/6 zombie god for 5 mana. It has double strike, and whenever we cast a creature spell, we also get a 4/4 black zombie warrior creature token with vigilance. When it dies or is put into exile from the battlefield, we put it back into our library 3rd from the top. This creature is monumentally difficult to remove for good, and will give us some rather large and imposing zombie tokens. The Scarab God was, for a very long time, one of the best zombie commanders, and it returns here to make sure his little zombie friends are still kicking ass. At the beginning of our upkeep, each opponent loses X life, and we scry X, where X is the number of zombies we control. We can also pay 4 mana to exile a creature from a graveyard to create a token that's a copy of it, except it's a 4/4 black zombie. Finally, when it dies, it returns to our hand at the beginning of the next end step. Talk about resilience. This thing is as hard to kill as Oketra, and it comes back way quicker. We also get an Eternalized styled ability on it that is able to target opponents' graveyards, giving us a 4 mana reanimation for whatever the best card in a graveyard is. That upkeep trigger can also win us games should we have established enough zombies. Remember, our upkeep takes place before we draw our card for turn, meaning that we have a very potent way to manipulate the next card we draw. Grave Titan is a 6/6 with Death Touch, and whenever it enters or attacks, we create 2 2/2 black zombie creature tokens. This card is probably my favorite Titan, giving us 2 zombies each time, which is a tremendous amount of value when you consider just how many cards in this deck want more zombies in play. It's also important to note that despite our gross fleshy boy being gross and fleshy, he is not in fact a zombie himself, although his appearance certainly would suggest otherwise. Dreadhorde Invasion is a 2 mana enchantment that has 2 powerful abilities. At the beginning of our upkeep, we lose 1 life and amass 1. This ensures that we always have an army token available to pump up with our other amass triggers. The second ability, whenever a zombie token we control with power 6 or greater attacks, it gains lifelink until the end of turn. This comes into play way more often than we'd expect given the way this deck works. Most zombies this deck makes are either 2/2 creatures or 4/4 creatures, but if we can bulk them up either with +1/+1 counters or static buffs like Temet, we can start padding our life total. See, zombies in Magic, Commander specifically, behave very much as they do in the real world, or the real world of fiction. Inevitability would be the best way to describe them, as the longer you take to take down the zombie player, the harder they're going to be to kill, and the more zombies you have to deal with. But the endless ranks of the dead will eventually overwhelm the table. And so to help our brain-hungry horde bulk up, we have a few cards that we want to add in. These cards are budget-friendly options that we can add in for whatever cards we have that don't quite pass the vibe check and can help improve the functionality and consistency of the deck. To begin, it's not really part of the upgrade section, but I will say, because I feel like I need to say this, I'm annoyed that in the deck list, rather than giving us all 3 talisman cards or all 3 signets that could go into this deck, we instead got 2 and 2 of each. I would take the signets out and just add in the 3rd talisman just to get some consistency in the mana rocks in this list. That was bothering me from the get-go, but again, this is not part of the actual upgrades. I will also be maintaining an arbitrarily instated budget of about $30. These upgrades are simply meant to begin refining the deck, and so if you find that you're enjoying what your deck is doing, you can of course go further in building up your list. Army of the Damned is a fantastic zombie card, and really is one of the classics of the deck. It might cost 8 mana to cast, but you're netting 13 zombie tokens. That's hard to beat, and you can cast it once more for its flashback cost at 10 mana while it's in the graveyard. We play this, and on the following turn, our zombies can be bulked up further to dish out a ton of damage to our opponents. Collector's Vault is a card that I have such a fondness for, but it is yet to be given the love that it deserves. In this deck, we want to be discarding cards. With the Vault, we draw a card, discard a card, and then we create a treasure token. Value! Death Baron is a lord that gives our zombies +1/+1 and Death Touch. I love the idea of bulking up on lord creatures, especially ones like the Baron that grant evil combat abilities. Death Touch is such a pain in the tuchus to deal with, and this will make blocking miserable for our opponents. Diablo Colossus comes into the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it for each zombie card in our graveyard. Whenever we cast a zombie spell, we create a tapped 2/2 black zombie creature token. My approach with these upgrades was to lean ever so slightly into the go wide strategies that zombies are known for, without really compromising the main strategy this new deck was going for. We could still go tall with our zombies and bash into opponents relentlessly, but in using some of these cards, we are making sure we have extra bodies that our opponents will still have to deal with. Along those same lines is my favorite zombie card, Endless Ranks of the Dead. This 4-mana enchantment has a very strong upkeep ability, creating X 2/2 black zombie creature tokens where X is half the number of zombies we already control, rounded down, token or non-token. This is what I mean by the inevitability of zombies. We will watch our horde grow larger, and in the end, we will have such a force of creatures that our opponents will not be able to stop the incoming damage. Grimoire of the Dead is a personal pet card of mine, being a legendary artifact with 2 activated abilities. We can pay 1, tap the Grimoire and discard a card, to put a study counter on the Grimoire. We can tap it, remove 3 study counters, and sacrifice it to put all creature cards from all graveyards onto the battlefield under our control, and those creatures become black zombies in addition to their other colors and types. We already can make 4/4 zombie tokens based on our discarded cards with Hashiton, and this will make extra use of all of the cards the table has put into the graveyard and bring them all back as zombies. Idol of Oblivion is another card draw utility artifact, one that I think is extremely helpful in a deck like this. We create zombie tokens rather frequently, even off of just the base list. Being able to draw a card every turn is always helpful, especially if we run out of the mana to simply cycle a creature. Mindless Conscription has a double duty enter ability that amass zombies 3, giving us at least a 3/3 zombie army. This also triggers whenever we draw our 3rd card each turn, which, given how much card draw this deck has, this arbitrary number should be easy to reach. This will also help our zombie token army grow exponentially. Oversold Cemetery offers us some recursion, where if we have 4 or more creatures in our graveyard at our upkeep, we can return one of them to our hand. It's a very simple ability, but I think that it's valuable enough to warrant its inclusion. We do have a decent amount of recursion that we discussed earlier on in this video, but I think having redundancy in this area is key to ensuring that we don't screw ourselves over if we lose access to some of the cards being in the bin. Patriarchs Bidding is another mass reanimation spell that is highly useful for this deck. We obviously will choose zombie, and then each opponent chooses whatever random creature type they choose, and then each player returns all creatures of one of those types to the battlefield. We can use this to bring back all of our zombies. You could, in theory, swap this out with Living Death to get the similar ability for the same mana value, but I think Patriarch's Bidding is more useful in that you don't lose your board state like you would from Living Death. Rooftop Storm is another classic zombie card, being a 6-mana enchantment that acts as an omniscience for zombies. While it's in play, you can pay 0 mana rather than pay for the mana cost of zombie creatures spells you cast. Nearly every creature in this deck is a zombie, and being able to cast them all for free is a level of ramp that is unmatched in these colors. Shadow of the Grave is a carryover from one of my Madness decks, being able to return all cards in our graveyard that we either cycled or discarded this turn to our hand. This is a great way to ensure that we keep our card advantage, especially if we had used those cards discarded to cycle or draw additional cards. Vault of the Archangel is perhaps one of the only lands I'd recommend for a Precon deck, but it giving both lifelink and death touch to our entire board is value that I wouldn't want to pass up. See, we are still able to go wide in this deck, and tall. Giving those big zombie boys lifelink means that we will be gaining a ton of life, making it very hard to take us out of the game. Zombie Apocalypse is our final zombie staple, bringing back all of our zombies, and then destroying all humans. They can't be regenerated. The second part of that ability doesn't always do much, but getting back all of our zombies can be backbreaking, especially if we've discarded them or had them die already. We run a number of mass reanimator spells that ensures that we never run out of steam, and we can actually extend into building up a bulky graveyard for a very well-timed apocalypse. Finally, Zombie Infestation is a phenomenal choice if you chose to go the route of Hashiton, as we get to discard 2 cards to make a zombie. This can be done at instant speed, and we can then do things with those discarded cards to make sure that they're not going to waste. Now, I've often given suggestions as to what cards I would personally cut from these Precon decks as I upgrade them. My main goals has always been lowering the mana curve by trimming cards of a higher mana value that really might not have enough oomph to them to warrant them being in that slot. Cards that don't synergize much with the main strategy or bring enough to the table, or cards that I just don't like. They're usually my first picks to cut. This deck also contains 39 lands, which I find rather high for a deck that doesn't do much about lands, and so I would even suggest trimming a basic land or two to bring the land count down to around 36 to 37 lands. What's unique about this deck is that with it being a deck that cares about zombies and has some cycling synergies, there is a lot that you can do with it. You can lean into the cycle theme and add in some cards like Ominous Seas that benefit you from drawing cards. There are a lot of cards from Ikoria, specifically the cycling deck from that set, that would go great in here. I think that this deck is a little light on interaction, having only 2 instant speed removal pieces. We got Swords to Plowshares, which is nice, but we can also add in cards like Path to Exile, Infernal Grasp, Reality Shift, to gain additional resources to interact with our opponent's battlefields. I think at the end of the day, this is a great installment into zombie-themed Precon decks, and is a fantastic deck to pick up, especially if you've never built one before. Zombies are a classic commander deck, being both strong and synergistic, and allowing you a great deal of flexibility as to what flavors of zombies you want to include. That was a gross analogy, but anyway, that will bring us to the end of our look at the Eternal Might Precon deck. What do you think of this deck? Are there some spicy add-ins that you thought of that we didn't discuss here? Let's discuss in the comments below. As always, likes and shares are the best way to help show your support. If you're new here, subscribe so you never miss a beat. I appreciate you all hanging out with me as always, and until next time, I'm Flynn.